and today we're going to be talking about all the books that I read in April. Yes, this is very late, but I am slowly catching up after being sick. So in April I read, I was going to say 9 books, but some of these are groups and I've forgotten the actual number, and because I'm filming in a new position, my computer is too far away for me to just look it up, which is going to be a problem. But regardless, even though I was sick, I did manage to read a semi-decent amount of things in April. So I'm going to tell you all about them. And as usual, I'm going to do this book battle style, which means I pair up all the books, I battle them against each other until we come up with the champion of the month. And I will leave timestamps below if you want to jump to particular sections. So I've got some fantasy books, a sci-fi and a thriller, and a bunch of different graphic comic books. So let's get into round 1. It's actually going to be like a little preliminary round where we've got The Burning Stone by Kate Elliott up against Red Sister by Mark Lawrence. So The Burning Stone by Kate Elliott is a book that I actually started reading about 6 months ago. It's about 1,000 pages long. Can you see it on my shelves behind me? Where is it? It's this blue one here. It's quite thick and the writing style is quite dense, so I just feel like these books take me a long time to get through. Regardless, I do really like them. I am really invested in the characters and I really want to find out what's happening. Since this is the 3rd book in a series, it is kind of hard to talk about. It's also an epic fantasy. There's 7 books in total and we're following a whole bunch of different characters. Probably our main character is Liath, who has been raised learning about this mathematical astronomy based magic, but then she starts being tracked down by different people and you don't know really who you can trust and who you can't. And in this book she's gone off with some people who have told her they can teach her more about her magic. We also follow an orphan boy called Elaine, I think you want to say he's called. He gets a little bit involved with these dragon people who have been attacking the kingdom, trying to take over. There's also warring within the kingdom, so all our characters have some involvement with what's going on with the royalty and trying to gain strength within the kingdom so that they can protect against the stuff that's coming from outside the kingdom. Elaine has kind of built this psychic bond with this dragon warrior who's trying to take over all the dragon people, and I'm not sure if he then plans to attack the kingdom, and if he does, what that's going to mean for his psychic bond with Elaine. Elaine in this one as well gets pulled off into a very magical adventure, as well as having some really traumatic stuff happen to him actually. He loses some people that he cared about a lot. We're also following an older woman who is running off with one of the princesses, and they end up having to travel through these magical stones that let you travel from one place to the other. There's so many characters who are all having really exciting journeys and learning a lot about the magic, and you also have this war kind of brewing underneath it all. I do just want to say, so I keep talking about dragon people when I talk about this book. That's kind of what they're referred to. They're also known as the Aika. They're not really dragons exactly, I don't think. They're more just like very big rock people is how I imagine them. But it's been a long time since I read the original description of them in the 1st book, so maybe I'm not even picturing them right. But they have all sorts of weird stuff going on in terms of how they breed and how they decide who gets to be in charge. So that's really interesting too, although we only mostly get it in like snippets of Elaine having this psychic bond. So anyway, I've talked about that for a really long time. The summary is it took me 6 months to read it, but I still did really enjoy it. But I'm kind of scared to continue the series. Then the other book in this battle is Red Sister by Mark Lawrence. So this is a science fiction fantasy, probably leaning on the fantasy side, but there's definitely some science fiction elements. So we're following this girl named Nonna who kind of has quite violent tendencies. She's ended up in prison about to be hanged when she is saved from that and gets taken to this religious group where they teach people to be assassins. Now a lot of the classes and the school stuff I didn't really enjoy. Our main characters are quite young and just a lot of what was happening I didn't care about, and it's quite a weird mix to have these young girls in this school kind of having young schoolgirl fights with each other, but also having this quite brutal political situation going on. But what I do really love about this book series is the magic system. We basically have these 4 different races, and if you have blood from these races you gain the powers from those races, and some people have more than one ancestry in their bloodlines. So one of the bloodlines is able to essentially slow down time, and then from an outsider's perspective it's like they can move and react really fast. I think there's one that's just like really big and strong, like superhumanly strong, and then there's kind kind of two kinds of magic that they can access. One is the path, where you can step onto the path and it kind of gains you power, but it's also very difficult to step along the path. And then I guess the other people just have like these random abilities. So Nonna does have this random ability where she can create these kind of like finger knives. But there's so many different powers within this world, and it was really cool to learn about them. So even though there were parts where I was bored, overall I was still really interested in the world and the magic. So putting these two books up against each other is actually kind of hard, because in some ways both of them dragged a little bit for me, but also there were elements I really loved. I'm definitely much more attached to the characters in The Burning Stone, but then I am on the third book of a 1,000-page books, so you would expect that if I'd gotten this far I would be quite attached to them. Whereas I think that's what's letting Red Sister down, is that I'm not as attached to the characters. But also one of the main driving forces for Nonna, our main character, is that she wants to get revenge, and I'm definitely finding out recently, as I'm reading a lot of books where people are trying to get revenge, that I don't really like revenge plots. I just had to stop and think for a moment there whether any of the characters in The Burning Stone are trying to get revenge. And they probably are, but I think it's mostly the like bad characters. And I think that's more how I view revenge, as kind of like a little bit unnecessary and really only something that the bad people would get obsessed with. So I guess that's why I struggle to relate to characters whose main focus is revenge. Anyway, I need to decide a winner, so I just looked at my spreadsheet and I gave them exactly the same rating, but like different things were higher and different things were lower. Part of me wants to say Red Sister should go ahead because the magic system was so unique, but actually the magic system in The Burning Stone is pretty unique as well. But I guess I would say a lot of the magic that's in Red Sister is the kind of magic that I used to pretend that I had when I was a kid, and so from that perspective it's fairly fulfilling to read about. So I think, because I have to pick something, I'm going to put Red Sister through to the next round. And we are moving straight on to that round, and we're going to put Red Sister up against The Dragon Keeper by Robin Hobb. So I already talked about Red Sister. The Dragon Keeper is the first book in the Rainworld Chronicles, which is the fourth trilogy. It's not a trilogy, it's a quartet, but the rest of the trilogies are trilogies. I'm not making any sense, but it's part of the larger realm of the Elderlings. So we've got two trilogies that follow Fitz, who becomes an assassin. We had one about the live ships, and then this one is following some dragons that have come out of what happened in the earlier books in the series. So these young dragons have been born. Unfortunately, there are some problems with these dragons, and so the people of the Rainworld who are looking after these dragons decide to get these people to become dragon keepers and travel with these dragons up the river to find somewhere better to live. Now, like a lot of Robin Hobb books, this is very slow. It takes a long time to even get to where what I said actually happens, but it is written on the back of the book that that is what's going to happen. And it does begin with the dragons and what's going wrong with them, so you know the book is going to be focused around trying to come up with a solution with that. So we're following a few characters, one of which is this Rainwild girl. So when you live in the Rainwilds, you kind of get these mutations, and the more you touch the Rainwild river, the more your mutations grow, or the more you use Rainwild magic, the more you kind of change. But this girl was born with claws, and they basically have a rule that children who are born with claws should be taken out into the forest and left to die. But this girl's father couldn't go ahead with that, and so she's been raised, and everybody kind of looks at her strangely because of that. And she's really trying to figure out what she wants to do with her life now that she's becoming an adult. Another character we follow is this girl who's 21, but she sees herself as an old maid, thinks she should have been married long before, but she has a really big interest in dragons and studying dragons. And because of that, she ends up making a deal with this man that in return will allow her to research the dragons. And that deal with this man really leads to some awful things. We do also get in this some of the characters from the Live Ship Traders series. So when these characters start going up the river to look at these dragons, we meet some of these characters, including some of the live ships, which honestly broke my heart, even though it was kind of a happy ending, but also these characters have just been through so much, and like seeing them and what happened to them eventually was just very emotional, and that's what Robin Hobb is really great at. So even though the build up is super slow, you're just getting to know these characters so well, and they're so realistic that they feel like real people that you actually know. So I am really excited to continue this series. The only problem is that the second book in the quartet, an audiobook, is narrated by a different narrator, and it's a narrator that I don't like, which has kind of ruined my life, and I don't know what to do now. I actually have the third and fourth book books in this series in physical form here. I can't read them until I get the second book. And I've mostly just been letting Robin Hobb books like come to me by fate. So I feel like continuing this series now is in the hands of fate. However, I haven't been going to secondhand bookshops lately because I've been trying to get to TBR 0, and going to secondhand bookshops is not helpful for that. So when will I continue this series? I don't know. Maybe when the Elderling Along gets up to this book, I'll be motivated to just like buy it, or maybe I'll try the audiobook again, but I didn't like it. And I have, for the most part, loved the audiobook narrations from this bigger series. Like, I thought they were the best audiobook narrations out of most of the audiobooks I've ever listened to, so that's very disappointing. Anyway, if I'm putting the Dragon Keeper up against Red Sister, definitely the Dragon Keeper wins because the characters were just so realistic. What's going on with the world and the magic and the dragons is just so creative and unique and interesting, and there's all sorts of twists and turns, and I don't know who I can trust, and I really don't know what's going to happen in this series, and I just really love Robin Hobb's writing and this world, and definitely this goes on to the next round. Okay, our next battle is going to be between Clara and the Sun by Kazuo Ishiguro and The Lying Game by Ruth Ware. It's a little bit weird to battle these two against each other because they're very different, but let's try. So Clara and the Sun follows this artificial friend who is in a shop waiting for someone to buy her, and these artificial friends are powered by the sun. So she has almost like a religious relationship with the sun, as she kind of sees it as this all-powerful provider. Now there is a new series of artificial friends released that are meant to be more advanced, and so it takes her a little while before she finally finds someone who wants her to be their artificial friend. And then this girl that she is the artificial friend for has some health issues going on, and so this leads to something that, like, you kind of get hints of what's going on and eventually you figure it out, but then things go in a different direction. And the ending, I really didn't like the ending. Up until there was some interesting philosophy about artificial intelligence and whether it would ever be the equivalent of a real human, but I didn't really feel like any of those topics were explored in depth. They were really just hinted at, and I was never really clear what the book was really even trying to say about that topic. And then the ending, just kind of nothing happened, or like the opposite of what you ever would have wanted to happen happened. And in a lot of ways it reminded me of Never Let Me Go by the same author, even though that one I felt like the ending was much more satisfying. But I feel like there's a lot of parallels between the two books, and honestly, if you've read both books, please hit me up in the comments because I really want to talk to someone who's read both books so that I can see if they also saw the parallels between those two. It has also been a little while since I read Never Let Me Go, so it might not be exactly the same, but there were some similarities. I do think I liked Never Let Me Go better than I liked Clara and the Sun, just because mainly you're following the perspective of Clara, this artificial friend, and she's not human, and the way she thinks is not human, and so it's very hard to follow her way of thinking and to feel like it's a relatable perspective that you're following, or even to understand everything about what's going on is very difficult. But I think if there had been a better ending, I would have really loved it, so that's a shame. Okay, so next we've got The Lying Game by Ruth Ware. This is a thriller, and I actually picked it up from this random box of books at this campsite once, but I have been meaning to read more Ruth Ware for a while. I read The Girl in Cabin 10, is that what it's called? And I didn't entirely like that one, but a lot of people had said The Lying Game was great, so I picked it up, and I did actually really like it. We're basically following this group of girls both when they're younger and as adults. When they were younger, they used to play this game where they would basically lie to people and give each other points for how well they pulled off the lie and how extreme a lie they managed to make someone believe. But we're also following them as adults when the one girl who still lives in the town of the boarding school they went to, she basically just texts them and says, "I need you," and they all come together to find out what's going on. As this was a thriller, I liked that there were aspects I was able to guess and also aspects I didn't guess, although the aspects I didn't guess did make sense. It's basically my requirement for me liking a thriller. But as well, I just really liked the friend group and the way that they interacted with each other. There were some things about the main character that I didn't like that much, like she is in this relationship and she doesn't treat her partner very well, in my opinion. But I guess part of it is just this fact that they've built up this experience of lying, and you're seeing how that has carried into all of their adult lives, and how those experiences when they were younger influenced what they've become when they're older. So I don't know what else I can say about it without spoiling it, but I did really enjoy it. And I think if I'm putting it up against Clara and the Sun, I did find The Lying Game more satisfying, especially the ending. And I even think the themes that were explored in The Lying Game were a lot stronger than Clara and the Sun, which, given that Clara and the Sun is really the kind of book that's really trying to explore different themes, whereas The Lying Game is more like an entertainment book that explores some themes on the side, if you know what I mean. Given that, I think that makes The Lying Game even more impressive. So I'm going to put The Lying Game through to the next round. Okay, so now we are on to my graphic novel comic section. Our first battle is going to be between The Wicked and the Divine, volumes 6, 7, and 8, I think. I don't know how many I read. Wait, I'll try and look at my spreadsheet. Okay, so volumes 6, 7, 8, and 9. However, at this point I have finished the whole series, and in my head I cannot keep what happened in the different volumes separate because I read them all, kind of binging them all in one go. So really I'm just going to tell you my thoughts about the series. But anyway, we've got 6, 7, 8, and 9 of The Wicked and the Divine up against Giant Days, which I also read a lot of volumes of. I think I read volumes 4 to 10, and I also read a Christmas special. So that's like 8 volumes of Giant Days. So The Wicked and the Divine follows these teenagers who get made into gods. So every 90 years, some teenagers get made into gods, and they're worshipped, and in modern times they're treated like rock stars. But also, every time these teenagers get turned into gods, after a few years, they're all dead. So even though they're having a really great time and being worshipped, they're preparing for the fact that they're gonna die. So it's kind of difficult for them. The main thing I really love about this series is the art style. The colors are so bright, and some of the pictures are honestly just pieces of art. And I do also really like the god aesthetic, especially some of the gods. I think that's probably where the series is let down a little bit, is that some of the gods I didn't enjoy as much. As well, I would say sometimes it is a little bit hard to follow what's happening, and maybe for some parts of the series it doesn't feel like much is happening at all. But still, overall I like the art and I like the characters, and I really like the concept. And there are some parts of the plot that I thought were really amazing. Then we've got Giant Days, so however many volumes of it, and I just really love the series. I've talked about it before. It follows these 4 girls who are going to university, and they're just having that regular university experience. First relationships, trying to find somewhere to live, trying to work out how to make money, trying to figure out what you want to do with your lives, all sorts of friendship and romance dramas. And I just really love it for some reason. I think it just makes me feel really nostalgic for that university experience, which is so long ago for me now. Ah, such a shame. I'd really like to go back. There were a couple of chapters of this that they used a different artist, and I do not enjoy it when they do that in these kind of comic series, even though I understand why it happens sometimes. But I just think the stories are so fun, so relatable, but there's some over-the-top things that happen, but that just makes it even more fun. And there's also a relationship within this series that I really ship, and I'm going to try this month coming up to finish the series off, and I'm really hoping I will get the ending that I want with that. So if I'm putting these two series up against each other, it's kind of difficult. I would say The Wicked and the Divine has better art and probably a more twisty story. However, Giant Days, I love the characters a lot more, and the art is still fairly bright and fun. Maybe not as beautiful, but I do still enjoy some parts of it. And I'm just so much more attached to the characters in Giant Days. So I think I'm going to put Giant Days through to the next round. And then lastly for this round, I read volumes 7, 8, and 9 of The Girl from the Other Side by Nagabe, as well as Erased volume 2 by Ken Samba. So firstly, The Girl from the Other Side. I've talked about this before as well. I'm trying to catch up on this series. I think it's not quite finished yet, but basically we've got this adorable, cute little girl, and she is being looked after by this scary demon type creature. And there is a town, but the town is locked away because if you leave the town and get touched by one of these demon type creatures, then you become cursed and you turn into a demon creature yourself. I think in the last volume of this, things got a little bit more involved with what's going on in the town, but there is also still some heartbreaking stuff happening out in the world with what the girl and the demon creature are doing together. Just so much of the series is really heartbreaking but cute and dark at the same time. It is true that in the individual volumes not much actually happens, which is why I've kind of read them a group at a time, and I've just remembered I have a hold on the 10th book, and I'm probably going to end up reading that individually, which is probably not the best way to read it. I might need to rethink that. But anyway, I do really love this series, and I think if you like dark, creepy things but mixed in with innocent and cute things, you might really like it too. The other manga that I read is Erased Volume 2. So I read Erased Volume 1 a little while ago. It basically follows this boy who has this ability which he calls, I've forgotten what he calls it, but basically things will start repeating, and when things start repeating he knows that there's something he can do to fix a situation. So something goes wrong at the end of it, then time goes back and he has to work out what he needs to change. In the second volume he went back quite far into his past, where there was a series of disappearances at his school when he was very young, and we're finding more out about that, and he's trying to change what happened back then, but he's also a little kid when he's gone back in time, so he doesn't have the same influence that he has as an adult. Now there are actually a lot more volumes of this series after volume 2, but I kind of think I'm gonna stop at volume 2 because I feel like I can pretend that's an ending and I can be happy with it. I do think maybe I just left too long between the volumes and I kind of forgot what happened, and because it's a very twisty time thing, that's not the best way to experience it. So I got confused sometimes, and they're just very long volumes, and I just don't know if I can make it through some more. I might pick it up again at some point and maybe like read it all together, like read it from the start again, but for now I think I'm gonna call it done, because I've got too many things to read, and so I need to just be brutal about saying that that's enough of that. But I did enjoy it. I just feel like sometimes I was very confused. I did enjoy the part when they were kids. They were quite cute. And I was more confused with what was happening with him when he was an adult. Anyway, if I'm putting these two books up against each other, I'm going to put The Girl from the Other Side through to the next round, just because it's so much cuter. I felt so much more emotionally engaged, and for the most part, I could figure out what was going on, which is definitely better. Okay, so now we are on to the semi-final. So in our first battle, we've got The Dragon Keeper by Robin Hobb up against The Lion Game by Ruth Ware. I did enjoy both of these. I would say The Lion Game is a much easier read because it was much quicker to get through, and just thrillers tend to be written in that very digestible way. I think I finished it super quick. I mean, I was listening to the audiobook, but super quick. The Dragon Keeper I did also read pretty quick, but that was because I was sick, and honestly I just lay on the couch and had the audiobook going while I rested. And since I couldn't really do anything since I was sick, I think that was the best way to spend my time. And even though it was definitely slow to start, even when it was slow, I still enjoyed spending time with the characters and getting to know them and understanding their problems and just worrying about what was going to happen with them and hoping that they would figure out a way through their problems that wouldn't lead to things getting worse, even though we know Robin Hobb books, things always get worse and worse for her characters in the beginning. And even when it seems like good things are happening, you have to question, is it really going to work out for the best in the end? Anyway, the summary is, I really love The Dragon Keeper, and even though The Lion Game was really good, it just can't compare, and so I'm going to put The Dragon Keeper through to the finals. Then we've got Giant Days up against The Girl from the Other Side, and I think for this, I'm going to bring it back to that thing with graphic novels and comics that sometimes it is hard to follow what's going on, and I think that Giant Days does a lot better with that. And even though I care a lot about the characters in The Girl from the Other Side, and I really like this dark, creepy, innocent, cute aesthetic that's being put together, even though I really like that, overall I just have such a great experience reading Giant Days and spending time with those characters, and I care so much about them, so I'm going to put Giant Days volumes 4 to 10 plus a Christmas special through to the finals. Okay, and then lastly we have the finals. So we've got The Dragon Keeper by Robin Hobb up against Giant Days, all those volumes that I just said. Honestly, I love all the characters from these, which is really interesting because Giant Days, you're just getting the characters through a few pictures and a few things that they're saying, whereas The Dragon Keeper, you're getting these really in-depth character explorations, you're getting their thoughts, you're seeing them go through really difficult situations, and you're really understanding their motivations and everything everything you want. But somehow I kind of get the same thing in Giant Days. But the story in Giant Days is a lot more simple, and while it's a lot of fun, it's definitely not as creative as the Dragon Keeper and everything that's happening there. There's a few parts where I am worried about the characters in Giant Days. For the most part though, I know that they're going to be fine because it's just things go wrong while you're at university and that's how you learn. And also it's a fun series, so I know that things won't get too dark in that. Whereas I feel like Robin Hobb could take the Rainwell Chronicles somewhere really dark. And already some horrible things have happened. I've still got 3 more books in the series. I really need to continue that series. I don't want to wait. I don't want to wait for fate to bring the book to me. Ugh, how annoying. Maybe I need to manipulate fate somehow. Anyway, I feel like it's fairly obvious that I am going to pick the Dragon Keeper as the champion of the month. It's probably not a surprise because I have loved so many books from this series before. I think they've been the champion of the month many times in the past, so you probably could have guessed right from the beginning. But regardless, I really love this series, and if you haven't picked up The Realm of the Elderlings and you like epic fantasy with really great character exploration and really interesting magic systems, then I really do recommend that you look at picking this series up. And while it kind of makes sense to read the series in order because things do interact with each other, you can potentially read them out of order. So you could start with the Live Ship Traders, you could start with the Dragon Keeper. The problem with starting with later ones is that you will get slight spoilers on some of the earlier books. I feel like some of what you get in the Dragon Keeper is very spoilers for what happens in the Live Ship Traders series, so maybe it isn't a great idea to read them in that order. But I do know that some people don't really enjoy the character fits, so if that's you, then maybe start with the Live Ship Traders. Anyway, that is all the books that I read in April. Now I'm almost completely caught up on videos, or at least until the end of May when I'm behind on that wrap up. But do let me know if you have read any of the books that I talked about today, because I would love to know and talk with you about them down in the comments. Or if you think there's any books that I would like based on what I said today, also let me know that down in the comments. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. I hope that you are doing well, and I will see you next time.